This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Karl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Karl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Hi everyone, my name is Karl Gruber, and this is the podcast World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with episode number 109 of this show. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the main topics of this podcast, spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment, as we meet up with two of my fellow podcasters and enlightenment seekers, Rodriguez and Karen Endsley, the co-hosts of the podcast called the Skeptic Metaphysicians. By the way, stick around till the end of the show, as I will have a special offer that will help you on your journey to building a better, happier life for yourself, and get a free copy of my ebook, The Three Pillars. So welcome, Will and Karen.
Thanks for having us, Karl.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
Oh, it really is. And, just quickly before I dive in a little bit further here, folks, please take a moment to click that subscribe button below so you don't miss anything on this show. There's so many great episodes here, so do that first. But yeah, Will Rodriguez, Karen Endsley, this is so awesome to have you two on the show. Now, before we dive into your podcast, the Skeptic Metaphysicians, and it's so cool to have you guys on, but both of us being podcasts. I know you guys both have careers in television, so let's find out more about you. Tell us about that.
Karen?
No, I was going to say you go first, Will.
Well, I've been in television my entire career, I would say, for the most part, except for a little stint beforehand. But I'm currently billed as an executive producer. I oversee the regional content in the state I live in, Virginia, for a national TV network that's owned by Cox. And I basically, what that means, it's a fancy way of saying I create programs and then hand them off to someone else to run on a daily basis, basically. That works out pretty well.
Okay, Karen?
So I had a slightly different career path. I was a teacher for a while. I ran a real estate investment company, and then he roped me in to the television world.
I have a habit of doing that, don't I?
Me too. God, you're so darn cute. So I started in front of the camera with a cooking show called Cooking from the Heart. And then we launched into a travel show as well called Destination Virginia, where we check out all the fun, cool things that the state has to offer. And I also work behind the camera. So I produce things, a little bit of, producer, director. I'm a floor manager for a weekly show. And yeah, that's what we're doing.
And she's unbelievably creative. She's such a great producer. I can't even imagine how she's not been in this career before now. She's so good. She's such a natural. It's incredible.
Well,
There's an unsolicited endorsement right there, Karen. But that's awesome. I understand you guys live in Virginia, so that's very cool that you do a show that is broadcast throughout Virginia. My experience is running the marathon in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
The Shamrock Marathon, which should be this weekend.
It is this weekend, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you running it?
The only time I run is if someone's chasing me,
or there's a big prize at the end.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Well, so you two, it's funny because we're both in the podcast industry, but we've also both been in broadcasting. I was a professional radio DJ and production guy myself in radio, not TV, for 20 plus years in both commercial and public radio. And so here we both merged into podcasting. So I'm guessing, going from TV to podcasting was a natural evolution for you guys.
Yes and no. When we first started the show, it wasn't meant to be a show. It was like everybody else during COVID, we had a really hard time of it. Mm-hmm. And I had especially hard time because at the time that COVID was hitting, I was being forced to face some demons that are inside myself that I was not happy about. So it caused me to go through that whole dark night of the soul process. And during it, I would take my phone, I would read Conversations with God, and I would read a passage that touched me specifically, and I would pick up my phone and just start free associating into my phone while I was recording it. And I would then, as a way for me to put that out there into the universe as me acknowledging the changes I needed to do and things like that, I would put it out there on a private, it wasn't private, it was actually a podcast. This is how this started. But there weren't a lot of people listening to it. I wasn't publicizing it. I wasn't marketing it at all, because this was really for me. And little by little, it morphed. It changed into then me going beyond Conversations with God and diving into different modalities to see what else is out there. What else do I need to know? What else will help me handle these things I'm going through right now? So I started interviewing different people that were Reiki practitioners or psychics or things like that. And it became the Skeptic Metaphysician, singular.
So you were interviewing them just on your own for your own information, and then it morphed into a podcast.
Exactly. And there was a time after I had made some progress, right? We are all ongoing progress. We're going to be we're going to be working on ourselves for our entire life, right? And then some. And I've acknowledged that, but there was a point where I felt better. I knew the path I was on. I was working on myself to a place where I felt more comfortable. So we were going to, as you know, podcasting takes a lot of work. And at the time, I was doing everything myself, finding the guests myself, doing interviews, editing, marketing, everything I was doing myself, and it was taking a lot of time away from my family. So we were going to close the show. We were going to shutter it. And as we were doing it, we happened to run across Apple Podcasts.
Well, I Googled it the last day.
There you go.
Because I wanted to know, you've been putting all this work into it. I'm like, does anybody even see this? And so I Googled it.
Yeah.
And then we happened on to these pages of reviews that we didn't even know existed.
Of your show.
Of our show. And everyone was a 5-star review. And people had written paragraphs about the show. And the one that touched us the most was someone wrote about how this podcast was his constant source of surrender and inspiration on his Phoenix process. And we thought, wow, we had no idea that what we were doing affected somebody that way. And then at that point, we were like, well, we can't quit this. If this is helping one person, and really helping one person, then we have to continue with it. Yeah. And fortunately, after that, Will found some really great software that helped cut his editing time down in half. So it was meant to be, because we did get that family time back, but we were able to continue the podcast.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting that you could have, and I agree with you, Karen, that if we can have one effect on one single person in a positive manner, it really is worth it. But that's hard to see, in the distance, what's the old, analogy? If a butterfly flaps its wings on the shores in Japan, does it produce a tidal wave on the coast of California? We don't know, but it does happen. Yeah. And that is really beautiful. So, well, for you, what about you two? First of all, Karen, how did you let Will talk you into being a co-host?
He talked me into so much. I don't even know.
So
I was
cute, right?
I was just thinking about this when he was talking about this. I'm like, when did I start? Why did you? How did this happen? But he asked me to join him. I don't remember when or what. Do you remember?
Yeah, we brought you in because we were having the bananas on our show. And so friends of ours from Orlando, we used to live in Orlando, Florida. She was a radio DJ for a long time. Radio personality, and she had a spiritual awakening of her own when they went to Africa, and we brought her and her husband on to talk. And she's a quadriplegic. She actually was in the Olympics, Paralympics. I mean, she's
not hang gliding, you name it. It's incredible,
remarkable woman. So we brought her and her husband on the show to talk, and because we knew them, I invited Karen to come on as a guest host for that episode. Karl, we had so much fun. It was such an amazingly wonderful conversation that I would invite her all the time to be a guest host again, because it changed the dynamic of the show so completely, made it so much more dynamic, so much more engaging, so much more fun to listen to and to be part of, that at one point I said, you cannot not be a co-host on the show. So then we rebranded to the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Yeah. Maybe I better get a co-host.
No, you do great on your own, Karl.
I have a 16-pound cat named Maya. Maybe she can help.
There
There you
go. Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
I
As
love
long as
it.
she doesn't push stuff off the the microphone off.
Well, you mentioned you went through the dark night of the soul, and I'll tell you, I think everybody goes through that. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I was having a that type of episode, and I sent a text to one of my colleagues, and I said, "Yeah, going through this, blah blah blah," and she goes, "Oh, so you're humaning?" And I go, "Yeah, unfortunately, I'm really good at humaning."
Yeah, that's a great point.
That
I think,
is a very good point.
in fact, we're going through something like that right now where we are truly humaning. We're going through an experience that's making us remember.
A few experiences, actually.
Yeah.
But this is one of the reasons why we chose to pursue this with the missions of spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment, is to find out how do we come out of that that dark night of the soul type of thing. And it's really good. But I do have have one question. You guys are a husband and wife team. You mean evidently you have so fun. Never any issues on that sometimes?
With this podcast, oh, there's probably one issue. And it's not untrue. He says basically I just come in, talk, and leave. So, and he's doing all the technical work, and but yeah, I am. It's not that I'm low tech, I'm no tech. So you don't want me messing with this stuff, really.
There he goes. It's funny because I do professional race announcing for marathons and triathlons and that type of thing. And one of the local race event promoters has hired me for many races. And, I come in, everything's set up. I grab the mic, I talk for 3 or 4 hours or whatever, and then I leave. And he calls me Mic Drop Karl. Where's my check?
There we go. Mic drop Karen.
Where's my check?
But to go into the answer a little bit more fully, more succinctly, she and I actually don't agree, don't see eye to eye on a lot of our belief systems.
Of things.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it so good, because we are giving each other the freedom to know that there are different paths. And my path is different than her path, and it's perfectly acceptable for us to have different paths. It's when I say to her, "What, are you crazy?" That's when you're in the wrong. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's gone from really trying to convince each other or persuade each other to just trying to help each other learn how we see things.
Yes.
You don't have to believe my way, but really this is how I feel. And I just want you to understand how I feel or how I see things.
Yeah.
And that's made all the difference.
And the key is to accept it,
Yep.
Yeah. In many ways that makes you a good team too. But I just one quick question. That one guest you said that came up, she's a paraplegic Olympian. You said the show was about bananas? What was that about?
So no.
Karen's a top-notch chef, right?
Sorry, no. Her
Foster. No.
her radio personality was Jana Banana.
Oh.
So it's the bananas because it's Jason and Jana Banana, but it's the last name is Shelfer, but we call them bananas because of that. Internally.
Yeah.
In fact, oh my God, I hope they don't listen to this show because they don't know we call them the bananas, but they're wonderful people. They really are. We love them. And so it was really about spiritual awakenings, period. They went on they had some, Jana specifically had some depression issues. She had some serious issues with what she was going through. She was having some challenges with her career, and they went to Africa. They went on a safari, and remember, she's in a wheelchair. And one time, there was a lot of friction between the two of them because Jana was not feeling well, so she didn't want to do a lot of things. So one morning, they woke up. They were supposed to go out on a safari, and Jana was like, "I'm not going." So Jason said, "Okay, we paid all this money. I'm going. I'll see you in a bit." So he went.
And she stayed in the tent.
Yes. At one point, she heard there's walkie-talkies, and she woke up to the walkie-talkie going, "Jana Banana, do not move." Like, what the heck is going on? So she gets herself onto her wheelchair, and she, as she's going towards the flap of the tent, she hears it again. "No, Banana, Jana Banana, do not move." She opens a flap and she is completely surrounded by a herd of wild elephants.
Oh my God.
And right in front of her is the baby elephant.
Oh no.
And if you know anything about African elephants, they do not play with their babies. But she and this baby elephant had this moment where they connected and they just stood there, her in the middle of this herd of elephants.
In her wheelchair,
face to face with a baby elephant. They just looked at each other. They connected. And at one point, one of the elephants just turned around and started walking away. And then they all followed along.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that brush with nature was what she needed to connect her, to understand that we are all connected, that there's an energy out there that isn't easily recognizable. But if you take a minute and connect, you can find it. That's the whole story was remarkable for me.
I was just about to say that is a great example of energetic connectivity. Yeah. And wow, that's just awesome. So, well, I've got to ask you this. I've been watching and listening to your show for a while, and what does for you? I mean, I know it's personal mission and seeking and finding and understanding, but what does the word metaphysical mean to you two?
Karen?
It means the woo. Now, Will and I have a slightly different take on our podcast. Like we come at the same thing from different points of view. He tends to be more into the science of it, the quantum theory, and I am more into the feeling of it all. So I think in our case, metaphysics is the combination of those two things that you can't necessarily see or in normal life explain. There's something there. But yeah, I think for me, that's what it means.
For me, we know that science will never be able to prove any of these things because the act of looking for answers gives us nothing but more questions. We found that when we were doing quantum mechanics and we were looking for the very smallest particle available, the minute we found the smallest particle that exists, we look closer and we find that there's yet a smaller particle still. So the act of us looking for that answer, it manifests into, they want to keep looking for the smallest thing. Well, let's keep giving them smaller and smaller so they can always keep looking. That's the way manifesting works, right? The more you want it, the more the universe is going to go, okay, let's make sure that they continue to want it. So that's why you have to be very deliberate with the wording that you use when you're trying to manifest things. Mm-hmm. So for me, metaphysics is the tools that you use to reach spirituality. Spirituality is what we are all trying to achieve, enlightenment. Metaphysics is the quote unquote scientific way to measure your success in achieving enlightenment or spirituality.
And that's what made it palatable for Will.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
He needed that scientific proof.
Yeah.
And I'm different.
I grew up in New York, Karl. I can't just say, if you say to me, I'm psychic, I can't just go, oh, okay, tell me more. I'm going to go,
you skeptic.
Right? How do you know you're psychic?
The way you describe that, Karen, is you have more of a feel for it, and Will wants more of the scientific. But that's one of the things that draws me into it is that for all of mankind's history, spirituality has been saying, that there is another realm in the unseen realm where we're connected to all that is in the infinite. And now, over the last 125 years, quantum physics is saying the same thing in scientific lingo, but just different wording, but saying the same thing. So these two are traveling parallel to each other. But so what I like about it is science is supporting what the spiritual teachers have for so very, very, very long, all of mankind. And I think that's why you and Karen and we can do this now. If we had, even though podcasts didn't exist, 100, 150 years ago, if we had done this, we probably would have been burned at the stake as witches or something.
Absolutely.
People have the desire to know. And I believe that we're getting that out there and allowing people, helping them to understand.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And in fact, science is coming in kicking and screaming, because I just read an article last week that talked about the fact that there is no possible way that there could be life after death. I just read the article last week. There's so much evidence on the contrary. Quantum physics talks about it in a very specific way, about how there can't not be life after death. We're energy, for God's sakes. You can't destroy energy. And yet scientists are still going, no, I'm blah, 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 blah. Oh.
And that's exactly how they sound too. When they
exactly. We lost Will on that.
Yep.
Well, I have so many questions about it. I love what you guys do. Now, Will, I've heard you mention in the intro of your show a number of times that you actually joined a witch's coven just to find out more and experience it all. How do you even find a coven, and what was that like?
No one's ever asked me that question. That's a great question.
How do you find a coven?
Right.
Oh, look.
I just
1-800-COVEN.
I just Googled them. No, I did not. No, that's a very good question, because they are super secretive.
Yeah.
In fact, I joined this coven when I was living in Florida, and I was a frequent visitor of a metaphysical bookstore down there. And I got Reiki certified there, and I took different classes there. And as I spent time there, I started learning things and meeting people that were frequenters there as well. And I started in my search really looking into all kinds of things. I looked into every religion imaginable. Wicca is the coven. The witchcraft is Wicca. It's another religion. So for me, it was natural to explore that too. And they've got all these books in this bookstore about witchcraft. So I started reading them. And as I'm checking out with these books, the owner of the store who's checking me out is looking at me, right? And every time I would come up with another book on witchcraft, she'd look at me again. And after a while, we developed this friendliness, I have lack of a better word. I was going to rapport. I was going to these events all the time. I was obviously expressing an interest in Wicca. And at one point, as we were just talking casual conversation, she said, I can't help but notice that you're interested in witchcraft. Is there something that you're specifically looking for? And I explained, I'm just looking into things. And she said, well, there's a group that I know that is doing I think at the time was either Samhain or winter solstice, some ritual. And she said, if you want to come as a visitor, I'm sure I can get you an invitation. Are you kidding? Of course, I would love to be invited. So as it turns out, she was the high priestess of the coven. And because they're so secretive, they're very careful as to who they invite in. And the first thing they do is they invite you to come to some of the rituals, so that the members who are unbeknownst to you are checking you out. You don't know they're members of the coven, because they don't tell you that you're just there appreciating this ritual with them. And little by little, they all decide, yes, 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 yes. And they extend an invitation. They extended an invitation to me. And I think it was 4 other people that were neophytes that were initiated. Well, and then you have to go through a period of a year and a day where you've got to be learning all the things about Wicca and all the rituals that they do. And you have to, at least in our coven, we had to create our own, sew our own robes that we wore in the rituals. Things, because you're putting your own energy into it. I mean, there's everything that they do.
Wait, you can sew?
I cannot. That's why I'm no longer on the coven.
I'm like,
no, it was my robe was woeful. It was it was terrible. But they think it's important. Everything that they do, there's a reason for it. You're imbuing your energy into these things. You have tools. They have athames, which are big knives. That's why people think witchcraft is devil worship and things, because they use tools that are specifically meant to focus your energy into things. So they teach you some of these things for that year and a day before they initiate you. Once you're initiated, that's when the good stuff comes in. But not until then. Not until then.
So your robe said Miami Dolphins on the back?
It probably should have. I probably would have been better taking a jersey and repurposed it, but no.
So I'm curious. This was before you started the podcast. So on your own personal seeking.
Yeah.
So many people in a religious background of Christianity or whatever would say, well, isn't that the dark side? I mean, is that an appropriate description?
It's not. It's not. In fact, just the opposite. Witchcraft is white magic. It is all light. There are covens that are focused on the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. Most Wicca, all it is, it's an earth-based religion. They worship nature, and the moon is their goddess. At least in this coven, the moon was our goddess, and there was the god of the hunt who happens to have antlers. And we shouldn't get into the conversation of where Karen knows I would love to take it, but a certain pope decided to make it evil, devil. And he dragged people kicking and screaming to burn people at the stake because they were doing things that was contrary to what that particular pope wanted them to do. It's unfortunately at the time it was very fear-based. Not a lot has changed, but it was really fear-based at the time, and a lot of people suffered for it because of it, sadly.
Well, we could do another entire show just on what organized religion has done to mankind throughout all of history. So, but we'll save that for another show.
Yeah.
Wow. So that is pretty amazing. And one thing, I'm going to go back to the shows that we do and the guests that we have. And I have to ask you this because I know both you guys and myself have had some pretty amazing guests on. What is one of the wildest experiences and guests that you have had on your show?
Can you define wild?
Wild good or wild bad?
we can go a lot of different directions.
Memorable.
Karen?
Well, which one? Are we thinking the same guy?
We are.
We had a guest who we introduced him through his work and books and whatnot. And pretty much the first statement that he made was, "I am the light." So meeting someone that, that's his belief is that every living creature on the world will go through him when they die. So that was a very, very interesting interview. Where do you go from that? You're the light. Okay.
Yeah. And you didn't say anything about this in the pre-interview, right? When we're talking beforehand, he didn't mention anything like that. He was a spirit medium. He had said some things to me before we started recording that made me go, oh, this guy might know what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as we started recording, Karl, the very first question, he just went, drop that grenade.
And that's when you said, okay, we're done.
I mean, I probably should have. That's not fair to say.
Yeah.
Who are we to say that he's not the light?
Right? We don't know.
All I know is that sounds exhausting.
And he told me I'm next, and that's a little scary.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta throw out one for one of my favorites. I've had her on my show twice. A channel, Christina Hill. Christina Hill channels a Syrian from Sirius B, a galactic being called Othello, who is a 12D ascended master. And she is actually channeled on stage at Carnegie Hall with one of the really famous guys, a couple people. She's actually done it on stage, but I had her on my show first with my mentor, Christy Whitman, who is now a channel for a group of ascended masters called the Council. But so I had Christina on my show she was solo channeling Othello. And she's amazing. She is, it really is phenomenal light. She just lights up the whole screen when she's channeling, and her whole demeanor and speech changes. But the greatest thing was Othello imitated dolphins. Othello did, the channel being, because dolphins evidently, according to Othello, come from Sirius B, and they're enlightened beings on Earth. And so if you ever get a chance, go check out that episode with Othello and Christina Hill. When you hear an ascended master imitating dolphins.
Well, And that's one of the things I want to ask you when we get you on our show, Karl, because I listen to your show as well. And you talk to these people that channel these incredible beings. You are so present with them. Whenever we have a channel on our show, it takes me a minute to really wrap my head around, like, is she put me on? Because this is a little weird.
It feels weird at first.
Yeah, but you just right there. You ask these questions and you have no doubt whatsoever. And that's wonderful. So I need to know how you do that, because I need to wrap my head around it.
Well, that's the skeptic in you. You
Yeah.
know, for me, I am so open. My heart and mind is so open to all of this, because, you know, my burning question for a long time, and I believe you have the same thing, is there's got to be something better than this. You know, I rarely ever watch television, and I turn on the TV and there's wars and rapes and shootings, and I go, click, I go, there's got to be something better. So I'm open to that. And you know, to me, there's no reason to me why they can't and why they don't exist. You know, as a matter of fact, like we said, we both have had channels, mediums, and members of galactic federations. So for you, I mean, I guess you're kind of still maybe that mentality, and nothing wrong with this, but I'll see it when I believe it. And you know, and I'm on the other end. I'll believe it. No, wait, I'll see it when I believe it. No, is that it? No, yeah. I'll see it when I believe it. That's my part.
Right.
You have to believe it first.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's something I got to get better at, for sure, because I feel uncomfortable. And I called it out. We had the Judah Collective. I'm not sure if you have heard the Judah Collective, but it is a collection of 350,000 angels that move as one being.
Oh, yeah, I heard some of that. Yeah.
And this one lady, Angie, channels the collective. And I called it out on the show afterwards. After she finished channeling, I was like, I gotta be honest, it was a little weird for me at first, but then it became so natural as we were talking to the collective. It just became this, oh my God, yeah, this is right on. It felt so natural and so right that it took, all my skepticism went out the door. And there's so much that happens in that episode. If you haven't seen it, you got to check out Karen's reaction the minute we introduced the collective. But that's been one of the biggest challenges for me. But one of the most fun episodes for me that blew my mind was the reverse speech episode.
Really?
There's a gentleman in Australia that has dedicated his life to investigating this phenomenon. And he was on the Art Bell show. He's made the circuits. And remember back in the 80s when everyone was all up in arms when you played the record backwards, you have these satanic messages and things like that.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that was a big thing with the Beatles. Paul is dead.
Yeah.
Yes.
And AC/DC and all, like, well, apparently that's a thing. Like that's the real thing. And he's dedicated his life to it. And he came with a bunch of clips on our show and he played them on our show. And it was remarkable because it was not like, he said pineapple. No, this was like pineapple. Oh, he said pineapple. He did say pineapple, right? You could definitely see and hear. I know what you're going to say, Karen. In that sense, we were swapped. You were the skeptic and I wasn't.
Well, he would tell us what to listen for too. So that was the only thing. You could hear him. Sometimes I was like, maybe.
But when he told us what to listen for and he played them, we heard them very clearly.
But I would have liked to hear them before he told us what to listen for.
Well,
just to see if we would hear it on our own.
Yeah. Well, but the gist of it is that he believes that our spirits are talking to each other unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to our conscious mind. So as we're choosing the words we're using, the rate of speech at which we're talking, the inflections that we're using, we're talking in one direction. And then there's another layer, a subconscious deeper layer, where it's our higher selves talking to each other in reverse speech and giving each other messages that cannot be lies. So he played some clips where obviously politicians that were found to be lying, and the clips said as much way before. It was also found, he played some clips where, very specifically, Kennedy had a premonition of his own death.
Wow.
And when in his inauguration speech, he played it backwards for us, and it said, "My head is hitting the car."
Yeah, the side of the car.
Yeah. And it was very clear.
That one was clear.
Yes.
Well, many people believe, including myself, that there are way more subliminal messages that are fed to the entire population of the world than anybody really wants to believe, whether, you want to think of it as a conspiracy theory or whatever. But, and it definitely flows through the media. Visual imagery definitely has a play almost on the level of a hypnotic type of entrainment. But again, there's another whole show we can do too. But wow, that's and really, I think this is why we are doing these shows, because the bottom line is we're curious, personal seekers ourselves. But what we're doing, and I was going to ask this question: do you feel that your show and my show, or shows like it, are making a positive difference in the world? And I think we really are.
I do too. In fact, we just got what I think is my favorite review so far. So now we get a message when we get a new one, and we always love to read them. But we got one last week from a guy who's a UPS driver. And so he was talking about how he's driving along the road and he's been binge listening to all of the shows. And the only problem he had was that there weren't more shows, because he's already listened to most of them. He only had a few left.
He's mad at us because we release weekly.
But he said he'd been interested in this stuff, but he didn't really have any friends that he could talk to about it. But he ended the review with a statement that, to me, is like, he is summing up what our goal is. And he said, "Thank you for helping me to feel normal." And I think so many people are starting to have these experiences, or opening their eyes and their hearts and their minds to everything that's happening, but it's still so fringe. I mean, it's growing, but it's still fringe. So I think putting the podcast that we're all doing out there and spreading these messages of acceptance is helping people to feel more normal and to be able to talk about it. And ultimately that, word of mouth, it's going to spread, and it's going to spread and raise the overall vibrations and the sense of community and the feelings of support that we're trying to do.
Well, I think many of us deal on a personal relationship with our circle of friends and family. I know personally, none of my family or personal friends are into what I do. And when they say, "Oh, you have a podcast? What is it about?" I go, "Well, it's about spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment." And their eyes just kind of glaze over. And I go, "But the cool part is I now have a circle of colleagues and friends from around the world that I am connected with. And it makes me understand that it is much more, connectivity throughout the world than and that's a big problem, I think, in our personal lives. We don't jive with the people closest to us. Sometimes you have to go outside of your circle to expand and grow.
And I think also COVID kind of shined a spotlight on that. We were forced to be alone. And for some people, it was what they needed. But for so many people, they just realized I can't live like this. And so now I think there's that need of connectivity in so many different forms. So I think really what we're doing is great. I mean, I'd like to think it is.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wind up in a little bit. We're talking to Rodriguez Karen Endsley, the host of the podcast, the Skeptic Metaphysician. Just an awesome show. I highly recommend you check it out on YouTube, and we'll put the links in the show notes and also on Apple Podcasts and everything else. I have a bit of a heavy question for you here. And I mean, mainly because you've had guests like I have. Our shows speak about how humankind, in many ways, many of our guests talk about this, humankind is in the midst of a major transition from 3D carbon-based physical existence to a 5D crystalline-based existence. What does that even mean? Have you guys touched on that topic?
We did. One of the wildest shows that we had was a gentleman who his episode completely blew up because
that guy.
Yeah. He brought an awareness to us that we're not just going into 5D, we're going way beyond. And there are starseeds out there that have volunteered to come here to this physical plane to help us fight a war that has been raging for 1 billion years against artificial intelligence. And that surprised me because we've talked to a lot of people, and the point of our show is for folks that are just learning about this stuff to feel normal. But this guy spoke so far over our heads that I had to stop him several times and back him up and go, can you explain this to me in a way that I'm going to be able to wrap my head around? Because and of course he sees a show like ours and he believes, oh, they must be talking about this stuff already, and floored us because we're not there yet. And what that showed me is that everyone is at a different level of evolution, for lack of a better word. And you're going to get the information that you need when you need it. And I think because we pushed the issue a little bit with him, we got too much. So that's, I think, the beauty of our shows in the space, that each one is set up in a different place to give the messages that our listeners are looking for specifically at that moment. Excuse me. I don't know much about the crystalline forms.
Yeah. And either do I. I don't. All I know is it's part of our evolution to a higher level and dimension.
What I understand is that a spiritual awakening or ascend, when we ascend, whatever that means, it's not what people are thinking. At least that's the messaging that I'm getting from people. It's not that we're going to change into crystalline form, and maybe we are, I don't know, but the messages that I'm getting is that it was misinterpreted. And you've heard of, obviously, your manifestation coach, you've heard about reality transurfing, and when we manifest, we make different decisions, we split off in different timelines that give us what we're looking for. Apparently when you ascend, it's getting to a vibrational rate that you're aligned with the universal energies much better than we are right now. When you say that the world is going through a seismic shift, I wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah.
And I think what we're feeling as a civilization is that birth. Every birth is messy, is difficult, is challenging. And there are people who are digging their heels going, no, you can't make me. And the other half are going, oh, yes, I want it so badly that they want it too badly, right? So you got to find that middle ground, that sweet spot. Because I went on a retreat not long ago. It was wonderful because it was all encompassing of all religions, but it was very Hindu. And I got to tell you, I found that these Hindus, they really know what's going on. I started reading the Living Gita because the messages I was getting was great. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I found that the message is just be. Just be. Be unattached. Don't attach to things. Just be. The more you can just be in the moment without expectation, positive or negative, the easier it's going to be for you to ascend, for you to find your space.
I had as a guest on my podcast a few months ago a guy known as the Bearded Mystic, and he is a Hindu, and he comes on and speaks about the Bhagavad Gita and all these the Vedanta, and it was interesting because I'm coming from North American spiritual aspect, still somewhat Christian based. And I'm talking to him. We had a really interesting discussion. But, I was going to mention another show that you guys would really, really find interesting, and anybody watching or listening would too. One of my colleagues, my life coaching colleagues, Nori Love and her partner, Augie, I can't remember his last name. They have a very popular YouTube channel called Team Alpha Broadcast, and they have some of the most far out guests on. They had interview, and they have several thousand subscribers and several thousand views, and they could do it live on YouTube. Team Alpha Broadcast. And they had a gentleman on who had returned to Earth. He was a human who had been signed a Marine detachment to fight a war going on Mars, and described it in intimate detail, and how body parts are blown off and then they regenerated them. And I mean, this is the type of thing, it's so far out there, but it's so popular. And so our shows seem like tame compared to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that we found, Karl, is that whatever you're ready for, you're going to get. And also you make what your reality is going to be. A war like that doesn't seem appealing to me.
No.
So in my reality, it doesn't exist
Yeah.
because we're trying to keep everything very positive.
And you know what you just said, we make our own reality. That is so in alignment with my spiritual studies and even the law of attraction, because what we project out there is what we see, what we believe we create. Wow, man, we're going to have like 7 more episodes here, but
oh my goodness.
I'm going to wind up one last thing here for you. What about you two personally, in the way you look and think about things and the way you live your life from the experiences you have you had on the show? Have you noticed any personal differences in yourselves?
Oh boy. And how? Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I'll talk about you.
Yeah, it's figured.
Will has become a very much more centered person. He meditates a lot, and if he doesn't, he must be sent to go meditate because he is a different person.
Will you go meditate? You're being a butt.
That's exactly. I'm like, just go find a space. And I think, and I hope that through this process, he is being comforted by learning all of these modalities and the different beliefs and religions, and they're all one. And just understanding that message. It's been just a beautiful transformation to watch him become the person he is now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was the typical executive producer, right? I was entitled. I was angry. I was competitive. I was a despicable human being for most of my adult life, even some of my childhood. I've learned that there were reasons why. And at learning the reasons why, I was able to process them and want to make the change. And that's what I'm undergoing right now. So it's helped me a lot in that sense, for sure.
And I could see that, Will, you mentioned you're going through a dark night of the soul, a certain part of your area and your career and stuff right now. And you can use that new centeredness to help you through this. I mean, a classic line is sometimes we understand that at the time, what seemed to be possibly the worst thing that could ever have happened in our life turned out to be the most important thing and the best thing that could ever happen, because the universe leads us in a direction for our overall good and the good of all. And I have a friend that when he was younger was called in the office of his job. He was expecting to get a raise and a promotion. He came out, he had been fired, and he was crying, and for weeks, he ended up, he went off and he bought a farm and ended up living a life that he was truly meant to. And if he had gotten that promotion, he may have stayed there for 40 years, depressed and sad, And so there's a real good example. The worst, what seemed to be the worst thing, could end up being the most positive, loving thing.
Absolutely, no question whatsoever. The challenge is that we're still humanity, right? And so it's hard sometimes to maintain your center when you're going through some of these things. So you have to, it's a constant reminder. Yes. But yeah, it's the more I remind myself, the more I meditate, the more I remember, and the more I can keep myself centered and help those that are affected by some of the decisions I've made.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, we're humaning. We're way too good at it.
Yeah.
Well, this is just great.
On Karen's side, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and she's going to hate me right now. But so I think we are blossoming. We have a blossoming channel in our midst, because I'm going to reveal it here. Since the Judah Collective, Karen is undergoing a spiritual awakening. The minute we stopped that interview, she experienced a change, a manifestation that she can't explain. I can't explain. It was a palpable difference. And now every once in a while, that same thing happens and something will come through that is astounding. So you ask if it's changed us. Yes, I think we both have changed exponentially, because I believe that now there have been several different guests on our show that have called out the fact that Karen is angelic. She's an angel living on this planet. I've been telling her that for a long time, but now it's not just me. Now it's psychic mediums. It's people who know this stuff that are saying there's a lot going on in you, Karen, and have called it out. And now this angel is starting to emerge. It's coming out. And I don't know if the folks who've been watching have been noticing, but every once in a while, Karen's face changes. It becomes this something else. And I'm noticing it. And every time I notice it, I kind of want to see if you notice, because she takes on this look that happens every time. It's astounding. It's incredible. So
I thought you looked kind of angelic, Karen. When you're hanging around with 350,000 angels,
they're my peeps.
Yep.
Just phenomenal, guys. Thank you for being on World Awakenings. So grateful to know you guys. How and where can people find the Skeptic Metaphysician and maybe contact you if they would like to?
The best place is our website, skepticmetaphysician.com. And then we're on social media. Facebook, it's Skeptic Metaphysician. And then Instagram, it's Skeptic Metaphysician Podcast.
Yeah. Probably the easiest thing to do is go to the website, because we have links to everything there. So if you go to skepticmetaphysician.com, you can leave us a voicemail there. You can watch the videos. You can listen to the show there. You can subscribe to the show there. You can connect with us on social media, everything. So yeah, that's probably the one-stop shop for us. It's there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you for being on World Awakenings. What a blast.
Thank you.
We had a great time. Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. Karl Gruber here. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the show after we had a great conversation with Will and Karen from the Skeptic Metaphysicians. As I mentioned at the start of the show, if you stick around to the end, I have a little surprise for you. It's a great way to get a free copy of my ebook, The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. If you would just go into the comments section of this podcast, write in there what you would like to hear or see in future episodes here on anything about metaphysics, spirituality, and enlightenment. So put in what you would like to have on this show, and also how you feel about the show, how you like it. So once you do that, I will provide you with a link to download a free copy of my book, The 3 Pillars. That is a book that will help you build a rock-solid personal foundation to help you live the life you love and love the life you live. Thank you so much.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Karl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.